Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 17th of February. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, UK unemployment rises to the highest level in 5 years as traders bet on more interest rate cuts from the Bank of England.
American and Iranian negotiators meet in Geneva as President Trump warns of consequences if Tehran doesn't make a deal.
Plus, India and Germany become the latest countries to debate age limits for social media as the backlash to inappropriate AI content grows.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The UK's jobless rate has risen to its highest in 5 years as more signs emerge of the labour market weakening. Official data for December showed the unemployment rate ticking up to 5.2% in the last 3 months of 2025. Wage growth also slowed, with the Bank of England's preferred measure of private sector pay slowing to growth of 3.4%. That's the lowest level in over 5 years. Bloomberg's chief UK economist Dan Hansen says it's not yet time to ring alarm bells.
Look, the jobs market is still loosening. There's no doubt about that. But I think we're not yet at a stage where this looks like it's, what I would say, snowballing, which is what can happen with the jobs market. It can move very, very quickly. So I think that's the main takeaway. Obviously, we have wages cooling, but that was broadly as expected. I think the main surprise this morning is on the unemployment rate.
Dan Hansen was speaking as traders have increased bets on rate cuts from the Bank of England, with 2 25 basis point reductions now priced in for this year. The pound has also weakened against the dollar.
2 high-profile sets of negotiations are taking place today in Geneva. The US and Iran are holding a second round of nuclear talks. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he's hopeful Tehran and Washington can broker an agreement. On Air Force One, President Trump said that he will be following the talks closely.
So I'll be involved in those talks indirectly, and they'll be very important, and we'll see what can happen. I mean, it's been typically, Iran's a very tough negotiator. I think they want to make a deal. I don't think they want the consequences of not making a deal. They want to make a deal.
President Trump has moved forces to the region and threatened to strike Iran unless it agrees to a deal curbing its nuclear program. Tehran has begun conducting military drills around the Straits of Hormuz, according to the Tasnim news agency. And Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi did hold talks with the head of the UN's atomic watchdog on Monday, but facing that American pressure, he said in a social media post that there would be no submission before threats.
Well, meanwhile, expectations are low for any breakthrough on discussions to end the war in Ukraine, also taking place in Geneva. Western officials and analysts say President Vladimir Putin believes time is on his side and that support for Ukraine will peter out. The spokesperson for President Putin, Dmitry Peskov, says Russia is taking the talk seriously.
This time we intend to discuss a broader range of issues related to the territories and other matters connected to our demands. The presence of the chief negotiator, that is Medinsky, is now essential. Indeed, the delegation will now be expanded this time. In addition to Medinsky, Deputy Foreign Minister Galuzin and other officials will be there.
Dmitry Peskov speaking via a translator. Russia has spent months repeatedly striking Ukrainian cities, leaving hundreds of thousands without power in a bid to bring the country to its knees. But Bloomberg analysis suggests the war's human and economic cost to Russia is rising, especially in border regions. Both sides say any potential progress today would need to be agreed by their respective leaders.
In other news, India and Germany have become the latest countries to discuss placing age limits on social media use. India's technology minister says New Delhi is talking to tech companies about the issue. It comes as Germany looks to set limits to access when it comes to social media platforms for people under 16, after the Chancellor Friedrich Merz's coalition partners announced their support for the proposal. Similar discussions are being had in countries including France, the UK and Ireland, which could set the stage for a new showdown with some of the biggest US companies. Meanwhile, Spain's Prime Minister says his government will ask prosecutors to open a probe into X, Meta and TikTok over possible crimes through the creation and distribution of child pornography using AI.
Bloomberg has learned that Elon Musk's SpaceX is competing in a US military contest to produce autonomous drones. The company and its subsidiary XAI are hoping to break into the weapons sector by winning a secretive $100 million contest to build voice-activated drones. SpaceX and XAI didn't respond to requests for comment. The news comes as Anthropic's talks about extending a contract with the Pentagon are being held up. Bloomberg understands the company wants guardrails that prevent Claude from being used to develop weapons or to spy on Americans.
The mining giant BHP posted bumper profits thanks to a surge in demand for copper and a broader metals rally. Earnings rose 22% year on year as a years-long effort to boost copper production paid off. According to the firm's CFO, Vandita Pant, BHP is set to boost its offering of the metal even further.
For the first time, 50%, more than just about 50% of our earnings, EBITDA, came from copper, and performance across our assets has been very good. To take example of Escondida, which is our largest mine that we run in Chile, we are revising the guidance up for this year and next year.
BHP's Vandita Pant there speaking after the latest earnings announcement. After the news, BHP shares in Sydney hit a record high. In London, shares are up as much as 3.7%.
The executive chairman of Hyatt Hotels, Tom Pritzker, says he's retiring from his position at the company and won't stand for re-election to its board. Pritzker cited an association with the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein and his partner Ghislaine Maxwell. In a statement, he said he, quote, exercised terrible judgment in maintaining contact with them and feels deep sorrow for the pain they inflicted on their victims. Hyatt named its president and CEO Mark Hoplamazian to succeed Pritzker as chairman effective immediately.
And those are our top stories for you this morning. Looking at the markets, European stocks are up by 0.2%. FTSE 100 up 0.4%. The pound is still weaker after the UK jobs figures out this morning, down 0.3%, 135.88. Looking at stock futures for the US market open, Nasdaq futures are down by 0.5%. We had lackluster trading in Asia because of the Lunar New Year holidays, very thin trading. In terms of the bond market, US yields on the 10-year approaching 4%, 4.02%. So down 3 basis points for 10-year treasuries. UK gilts down 4 basis points at 4.36. And you have gold weaker 1.4%. Oil also down by more than 1% for Brent crude futures. Those are the markets, Stephen.
In a moment, we'll dig into the detail of the latest UK jobs data, plus what to expect from today's nuclear talks in Geneva. But another story that we've been reading this morning about how the world has changed since the era of lean in and girl boss. Alice Robb's been writing about this new wave of books by women about their relationship with work and how they're focusing on the pleasures of giving up. The likes of A Year of Nothing, Life After Ambition and Exit Interview look at the excesses of hustle culture that was epitomised by Sheryl Sandberg's manual, which sold millions of copies in the 2010s. The newer volumes are more focused on a harsher reality, dealing with workplace sexism, balancing pregnancy and motherhood with demanding jobs. And this is a perhaps bigger rethink out of the zeitgeist, which has changed now, but it's also reflective of something that's emerging in the data as well, of more women pulling back from ambition for promotion. The gender pay gap is widening. The picture in the reality looks a lot bleaker than perhaps were painted in those era of lean in.
Yeah, look, I remember when Sandberg's book came out, I was in the US and there was just such a frenzy. She was a leading woman in business. She was saying, the sky's the limit for women. On the other hand, there was quite a lot of criticism, even at the time, that maybe she was blind to the kind of systemic issues that even her own readers were facing. But I kind of feel like read it and weep now. Is the pendulum swinging too far the other way? Women saying that they increasingly doubt whether they can actually get promoted and move up, and somehow, child rearing being the solution to that. I have lots of questions about this. I mean, surely people should have more choices, not fewer.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of idea that Alice floats in her piece that there was an exception between 2013 and 2020 to the trend, certainly food for thought as well. We'll put a link to that article in our podcast show notes.
Well, let's bring you more now on the latest UK jobs data, which shows signs of weakening. The pound has also dropped as traders price in more interest rate cuts from the Bank of England. Our UK economy reporter, Irina Angel, joins us now for more. Irina, good to have you. How significant then is the weakness in this data?
Well, the data does paint a dire picture, but it's important to note, it's not a step change. There's no snowball effect. It's rather, it confirms the jobs market is unraveling as it's been, for the last few months. UK unemployment has climbed. That was a surprise to 5.2%, and that's the highest since the pandemic. And then pay growth, private sector pay growth, the measure that is tracked by the Bank of England, that one slowed to a 5-year low of 3.4%. However, there are some signs of stability. Payrolls fell less than expected, and vacancies even, increased a bit in the 3 months to January.
You've been looking in particular, Irina, at the trend of youth unemployment continuing to rise there as well. What do we know about the factors driving that?
That's right. So, whilst when you look at, overall unemployment, that's, ticked up a bit. When it comes to youth unemployment, that's the worst in over a decade. So, 1 in 8 16 to 24-year-olds is unemployed. And it seems like young people have been bearing the brunt of the job slowdown after Labour increased employment costs, the higher NI contributions and large increases in the minimum wage. These discouraged hiring for graduate roles and also discouraged hiring in sectors like retail and hospitality. And these are, of course, the ones that employ a large number of young people. Interestingly, the UK seems to be diverging from the European Union when it comes to youth unemployment trends. So over where you are, Stephen, youth unemployment has been coming down in recent years, and it's nowhere near pandemic levels. So it's interesting to see this difference playing out.
Yeah, I think that is very interesting. And also this idea that the Bank of England, that traders are now pricing in 2 25 basis point rate cuts also for this year. And many of our guests talking about whether that might tick up at some point to 3 or not. We shall see. Irina, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for being with us. Our UK economy reporter, Irina Angel. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
The talks between Iranian and American officials are taking place today in Geneva over efforts to curb Tehran's nuclear program. It's the second round of negotiations this month as the US has continued to build up its military presence in the region. Bloomberg's Gulnar Motovali, who leads our coverage of Iran, joins us now for more. Gulnar, how much pressure is Tehran under then to come to an agreement with the US given the American threat of airstrikes?
I think the pressure is tremendous. I think if you look at Iran, at the way that the situation for Iran has changed over the past couple of years, it's quite extraordinary, the shift in the country's fortunes. If you look at regionally, they don't have the same level of strength in their axis of resistance around the region. Their economy is weakening successively, currency crashes every month, inflation spiraling. That's a large part to do with sanctions, another part is to do with endemic mismanagement. And this relationship with the US obviously is getting increasingly hostile, and the situation for the Islamic Republic, I would say, is extremely fragile right now.
In terms of where the compromises could be found then, in terms of these negotiations and the nuclear issues, where do you think they might be? So I think just looking at the signals we've been getting, the interesting thing that I think is this time around, the Trump administration, and even if you look at what US Secretary of State Marco Rubio was saying yesterday, this is someone who's been extremely hostile towards the Islamic Republic throughout his political career. And yet yesterday he was saying that he was hopeful, with all the caveats he has and reservations he has about dealing with the Islamic Republic. He said, I'm hopeful that we can get to a deal. And I think there are areas in which they are willing to get to a compromise. And my sense is that on the Iranian side, they're willing to provide
attractive financial incentives for the Trump administration. And we had something similar back last year, around April last year, when we had those around the first attempt between this second Trump administration before the Israeli attacks in June, when Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, met Steve Witkoff for the first time. He penned an op-ed for one of the big US papers saying our economy is $1 trillion opportunity for the US. And I think that sentiment still stands, because I think they feel that they know what they need to do to entice Donald Trump, the US president. I think the issue they have right now is they have a lot of hardliners within the Iranian establishment itself that just resent the idea altogether of speaking to the Americans, but at the same time understand that if they don't, there's real peril on the horizon for them.
Conor, how do these negotiations play into the story of the protests in Iran as well? I mean, how do those pressures combine when we're thinking about what happens next?
I think that's a really important question, and it's something that obviously when we kind of get into the weeds of the geopolitics and the diplomatic back and forth, that we kind of forget the fact that we had this massive uprising, this huge expression of dissent and opposition to the current system. And I think the truth is, I think a lot of people in Iran will be disappointed, people who are very opposed to the current regime, because they will interpret any success in these talks and any deal as just buying time for a system, a regime of political rule that simply hasn't been serving people's needs for a very long time. And so I think domestically there are going to be people who are going to be kind of divided quite fiercely over this. And I think on the other hand, there are people who do just want to be able to get along with their lives, who desperately need economic relief, and don't care which way it comes.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.